Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi Magnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. 3 masked men rob a woman at gunpoint in Endeavour. Licensing Division fraud case dismissed due to delays. Imber denies $1.3 million office renovation claim. Padarath says WASA transformation won't mean job losses. Now for the details. A 63-year-old woman was robbed by armed men at her home in Endeavour on June 24th. Police say the woman told officers that around midday, 3 masked intruders entered through a kitchen window. One of them pointed a gun at her and announced a robbery. She handed over a safe worth $1,200 containing cash. The suspects escaped on foot. Officers responded but were unable to locate them. CCTV footage is being reviewed as investigations continue, led by PC Raymond. 3 men accused of fraud at the Caroni Licensing Division have been discharged after repeated delays by the prosecution. Motor Vehicle Inspector Errol Supersad, Clerk Sudesh Radhakisoon, and Technician Adrian Mohammed were all separately charged in a 2022 matter involving forged vehicle transfer documents. The case, moved under the Administration of Justice Act, was dismissed by Master Adia Mohammed after the prosecution failed to proceed despite multiple extensions. Defense attorneys criticized the delays, arguing the system was misused and that their clients lost 2 years awaiting a trial. Former Public Utilities Minister Colum Imbert has rejected claims by current Minister Badi Padarath that $1.3 million was spent refurbishing an office during Imbert's brief time in the post. Speaking during budget debate on June 23rd, Imbert said the actual cost was $160,000. He accused Padarath of exaggeration and misrepresentation. Speaker Jagdeo Singh reminded Imbert that the matter was raised in a previous debate, but Imbert insisted he was replying to statements made by Finance Minister Devendranath Tanku, who said he stood by earlier comments. The House is set to meet again on June 27th. Public Utilities Minister Barry Padarath says changes at WASA will not lead to job losses. Speaking during the budget supplementation debate, Padarath said the former administration's plan threatened workers' job security, making it difficult for them to get loans. He claimed the current approach is boosting morale and productivity. Responding to opposition concerns about IDB funding, Padarath said discussions with the bank are ongoing and the transformation will be people-centered, not politically driven. He also accused the former government of underfunding WASA by nearly $500 million. But that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Magnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
This is Talking Point. I'm sure Michael Small, and a lot to get through to close out the week. Now, I'm not necessarily going to speak about the new central bank governor directly. There is an editorial that asks a pertinent question, and I think ironically makes an answer to one of the points that they were trying to make in said editorial. But we'll get to that in a little later. One of the things that I did want to just touch on briefly, which I find very interesting, is, well, we've now, I guess you could say, reached our first legal situation with one of the members of the current administration. There were a few instances with the previous administration, but for the most part, it seemed to die down. I mean, famously, they tried to use sedition laws when it came to statements in the public, which was a bridge too far, but nevertheless, Anna Roberts is taking legal action against Rhoda Barrett, I believe, who is the owner and operator of News Source, I guess you could say an independent social media platform. Now, The issue is with regards to comments made, questions posed, and potentially, yes, you could pose questions that could imply a lot of negative things. And this was specifically with regard to the accident that Anna Roberts was involved in. The thing is, I do find it interesting. Now, I have not necessarily seen all of the original posts of Rhoda Barrett, and I make it not just a habit, but conscious effort to not follow whatever Anna Roberts puts out on social media. Every now and then something does come up on my feed, and I may look at it, but generally speaking, I find very little value in most of his arguments. Not to say that he's always wrong, but a lot of his stuff is bacchanal, which leads me to the point where, without knowing the specifics, I do find that there's a little bit of irony that Minister Roberts is looking to sue someone who is potentially doing, at the very least, what he did when the UNC was in opposition for the last 5 years. Asking speculative questions, making speculative statements, maybe making outrageous statements. It'll be interesting to see where this lawsuit goes, because depending, it may cause him and his own operation to once again, I guess, if it hasn't already been looked at with a bit more scrutiny, because generally what tends to happen in politics, I mean, this is basically what happened to the Republicans and Trump. You want to put Clinton up for impeachment? Just wait. We'll find our moment where we'll do an equally nonsensical impeachment. But at the end of the day, while I find Trump's impeachment was nonsensical, the Republicans had themselves to blame for that one, right? It's kind of hard to say the Democrats were at fault without saying, hey, but all you kind of did something, but in many ways more nonsensical, Clinton's impeachment was. So when you do a tit, you need to expect the tat. You need to expect that the standards, if you potentially want to set the bar at a definitive point, you want to go out there and say, this is the standard that I'm going to hold you to, your political opponents will be more than happy to hold you to that same standard. Will you be able to live up to it? It all depends on where the lawsuit goes. Next thing you know, it goes to court and the judge says, Mr. Roberts, you're kind of stretching the meaning of the word slander just a little too far. Or maybe they side with him. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and to some extent, I don't have that much incentive to look into this matter, because at the end of the day, it is bubble and bubble. All I did see one pertinent point made allegedly by a family member of one of the deceased in the situation, or the deceased in the situation, which gives me concerns, but I will leave that for others to deal with. I just found that essentially you had, because Mr. Roberts is a social media political commentator on top of being a government minister, and he is going after another social media political commentator who just so happens to be someone at least perceived to be supporting the other side. Who knows? I'm not saying there's bias there. I'm just saying usually you don't want to put yourself in a position where you can be perceived to be biased. I'm not even making a speculative statement on that, Mr. Roberts. I'm just saying what would be best practice. At the end of the day, let them have at it. Good luck to whoever is in the right on that one. Now, a couple of other things to get to. One of course, the whole situation with school violence and deviant behavior and criminal behavior by kids, again, it's one of those problems where I don't know if it's getting enough press, and I don't know if we're still taking it for granted, because we're kind of just waving a hand and saying, hey, police, Ministry of Education, somebody else, you deal with it, right? And society, in too great of a degree, is maybe willfully ignorant of the problem. Because I guess to some extent, I only worry about my child, and my child not involved with that, and my child is a good child. Let's not forget, half of the people that end up in gunfights with the police and end up dead, their parents always call them a good child. The other half acknowledges the truth and acknowledges the fact that, and is willing to admit, listen, the challenges at some point was too great for us. We didn't know what else to do, but we didn't condone that. We're not going to defend whatever it is that our boy, our girl did, right? Now, Pastor Dotton has come out on a news report and basically points out or further highlights the problem, but I am left asking, that's nice, but what are specifics now with solutions? Because he pointed out the fact that, look, when the Student Support Services Unit started, there were 5,000 children being suspended. Now you have 21,000 children being suspended. And he doesn't see any structure anywhere to deal with that number of people effectively. And in part, what we've seen is that suspensions don't really do much. If you are one of those students that really doesn't give trouble, that doesn't want to give trouble, yeah, one suspension is probably enough to scare you straight, because then when you get home, your parents will be real mad at you, and you will probably either feel some level of consequence and shame. It will be a disruption to your normal everyday life because you're most likely a normal everyday student. But a lot of the deviants are not in a position to be considered normal everyday students anymore because of whether they have situations at home, situations in the community, bad influences, they're being led astray. And then, because of that, a suspension with that divergent outlook from that bad influence is not really going to impact them the same way. Of course, then there's also the ones who maybe they're not being led astray, but life is just so hard, and academics is not necessarily being done in a way that suits them, whether financial constraints or bad teachers or what have you. What is a suspension to them? The system is already failing them. Who cares? Oh, you're going to suspend me from the system that's failing me? And I think what Pastor Dotton was pointing out was that, all right, there need to be more social support services, but I think we need the conversation now to go past that point. What specifically? Because basic social support services, or the social support services for the ordinary student that's not being influenced by any bad actors, that is not under any significant amount of stress because of financial conditions, geographic conditions, criminal conditions, etc., etc. Those kind of social support services might not be enough to try to reverse what may be in some cases an irreversible problem. So my thing is, we need to kind of realize they're kids, but we can't treat the things that are affecting them with kids' gloves. So to some extent, while I'm not saying that they should be locked up in prison, but serious and, if necessary, very strict and hard programs might be needed. But the key is, it's not so much to deal with the kids. In part, yes, it is to, one, take them out of an environment where they could negatively affect other children and or teachers, parents, etc. But two, it's also to ensure that you take them out of whatever it is that is affecting them to cause the behavior. And you might need more than just, oh, we'll suspend you from school. Oh, well, there's an after-school program. You might need more than that, depending on the level of influence. Are we ready to kind of have these hard discussions? And then also acknowledge the fact it's going to take resources committed. All right, running out of time. One thing that I found interesting in this whole situation, and I'll just say this, the opposition leader, speaking to Santa Rosa Government Primary School graduation ceremony, basically, indirectly, I would say, in my opinion, supported the government's stance in the whole situation, because she basically asked the kids, how many of you are aware of what happened with Holy Faith Convent and the 5 students who were involved in that incident that assaulted one student, 5 against 1, in the public street and were arrested? I'm paraphrasing. But the key point was how many of the kids were aware that other students did a bad act and were arrested for it. And then she pointed out, it seems like you all don't read the papers. But she went on, you know, to the kids, yes, but still, this is important. You can't shield them from everything. How many of you know that if you get convicted, you will have a police record? If you have a police record, you can't get a job as a police officer, fire officer, to get into the public service. And potentially, it could affect you going to university. And she was not, in this moment, what was she doing? She was not trying to figure out what is the angle to oppose the government. She was saying, this is the stance. How many of you are aware of what's going on in our country and the stance the government takes? You all need to understand. You all need the knowledge to not just think as kids we could make mistakes and we'll be forgiven. There's something about that phenomenon with regards to parenting in the States in the last generation where kids are too easily sheltered. And she's trying to warn them. She's not in this moment trying to say, oh, but the government doing this wrong. And the government, no. And the thing is, I'm just saying this for the sake of arguments. Right now, Kamala Persad-Bissessar got overwhelming support in the election, especially when you consider how many seats she did not contest, her party did not contest, right? So they have a mandate to do things. They have a longer leash than even the previous PNM administration, just because of the discrepancy in the difference of votes. They have a longer leash to, if necessary, be more aggressive, at least for certain things that are within the public interest. And the public is not going to automatically assume that they're wrong. The public is going to some extent, give them a lot of leeway and support what the government does, which means that if you want to oppose for opposing's sake, you will be viewed as automatically wrong off the bat, because we're only 2 months away from such a lopsided result. The public is not looking to just automatically say, hey, what Kamala doing? She wrong, you know. No, she's going to get the benefit of the doubt. The benefit of the doubt that you lost, given the trend of the decisions that you made when you were in power. So now, there's a big difference between the UNC in year 9, year 10, opposing everything for opposing's sake, when the government lost the benefit of the doubt, and the new opposition opposing everything for opposing's sake, when the new government is going to get the benefit of the doubt. Because they were not just voted in because you were voted out. They got more support. They were voted in proactively. And in my mind, the opposition should do the math and realize, look, we can't just oppose for opposing's sake. We will look in the wrong. We will be perceived to be wrong in the eyes of the voters who, yes, have imperfect knowledge and make imperfect analysis. But the point is, we will lose even more ground in the court of public opinion. Meanwhile, at least from where I sit, I'm not expecting Kamala Persad-Bissessar to last more than 1, maybe 2 terms. Just because of her age, it's similar to Dr. Keith Rowley, right? And this is not an easy time to be prime minister. It's going to be a lot of hard work. And those who pray should pray for her physical health and well-being. Because the last thing I think anybody wants to see, I hope, whether you like her or not, is to see her work herself into the ground, because generally speaking, you will see it before our eyes, and that's not necessarily a pleasant thing. But the point is, at some point, she will have to retire. And it's not, we're not talking 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line. And instead of potentially positioning yourself for long-term success, you're doing very short-term nonsense, which isn't even working in the short term, to be honest. But if you are seen as a reasonable opposition, when Kamala Persad-Bissessar retires, and there's potentially a hole in leadership to succeed her, who would be better positioned then to make an argument we could continue the good work, even though we're in a different political party? I don't know. It's almost like if politicians really don't think long term. As better at politics they are than me, some of the basic low-hanging fruit mistakes that are proven by their own failures of results. So let's not say, Sean, you don't know what you're talking about. Just look at the election, you know? So many things that I was speaking out against before the election ended up proving to be very important for the election. Maybe some of the people in the media know what they're speaking about. I don't know. All right. A couple other things. One, there's been some concerns about performance spaces being in disrepair. Now, Queen Soil is included in it, although it seems as though the issues with Queen Soil isn't as bad as with Napa. Two reasons why I bring it up. One, as someone who has performed on stage, it is a little bit disappointing. Two, the further parallels with 2010, when the People's Partnership came to power. Of course, technically it was, I believe, the Patrick Manning administration that started the Napa project. The People's Partnership were there for its completion. It was a bit of a white elephant at completion, and the partnership kind of did what the Rowley administration did for the ferry service. They didn't necessarily know how to navigate the situation properly, and to some extent took some of the blame for it, and that could have been unfairly. Regardless, now they're in a situation where it seems like Napa has a lot of maintenance issues and needs potentially reinvestment to fix certain things, which is a shame, because on one hand, you don't want the asset to waste away, but on the other hand, how much money are you willing to commit to a performance stage when we have issues like crime, education issues, school violence issues, public utility availability issues, flooding issues? Like, as someone that performs on stage and knows the importance of art and sport, we kind of have bigger needs, right? So how do you prioritize these things? I don't know, but it is kind of disappointing. And it seems that the previous administration basically said, well, we're not really going to prioritize certain things. But a lot of places weren't funded enough, right? Including important things like education. But another thing, just wanted to point out, a woman was tricked. She thought she got a good deal with regards to buying alcohol. She was messaged on Facebook. This wasn't even Facebook Marketplace. Listen, there seemed to be someone fished and she took the bait. Please be careful. It's already bad enough that the TPS has to warn us about Facebook Marketplace. There are phishing scams on emails, and now it seems they could be phishing scams on messages. If someone messages you, and this has happened to me quite a bit since I started being on television for different reasons, right? If someone messages you and you don't know them, you need to some extent, be wary, because in some cases, it's an outright scam. Some random person from abroad with some random sob story that you know nothing about, has nothing to do with you. I haven't gotten local scams yet, but we'll see how that goes. I did say I'm not going to speak about, there was an editorial where there's concerns about the impartiality about the new central bank governor. Now, here's the thing. The first argument that was made is the fact that he was appointed by the government. But that's generally all central bank governors are appointed by the government. And the editorial, this is in, I believe, today's Newsday, points out to the fact that, look, the minister has certain powers over the central bank. The real thing that they bring up is the fact that it's a banker who is now in charge of the central bank. A banker who, and no offense, but this is like labor being on state boards that then have to negotiate with unions. This is like labor leaders on state boards who then have to negotiate working conditions, compensation packages, etc. with unions. You have a banker who, in the past, their terms, their reserve rate, etc. was dictated by the central bank. Now he's in charge of the central bank. Depending, if he does a Reginald Lamont, doesn't know how to switch his hats from a private lawyer to the Attorney General, if the central bank governor doesn't know how to take off his private banker hat, yes, he may be retired, and put on his central bank governor hat, assuming he has one, we might see a similar situation, depending. But wait and see, right? I really dislike in governance the whole wait and see approach. Okay. We're more or less out of time, but I do want to go into today's daily review. We'll jump straight to the second topic because I can't let the week pass without mentioning this, but let's go with today's daily review. Now, technically, we just not too long ago launched a whole new airport that's supposed to bring 3 million people in a year. Now, one would think, all right, we're supposedly, in theory, getting 3 million people. Is the airport even operating, open yet? I don't know. We'll see. I'll see when I go to Tobago, right? one would think, all right, in theory, more hotels, right, to facilitate these 3 million people that are coming from the thin air, apparently, because no one's giving any talk about, oh, what carriers bringing them in, what market are we targeting to bring in these 3 million people? Oh, no, we built the things, they will come, you know? Well, in which case, I don't know why we spent $1 billion on an airport. We should have just put a cornfield with a runway, and, you know, the spirits of the old Dodgers teams will bring all of the passengers to us, those who get the reference Field of Dreams. Now, of course, one of the bright spots in Tobago tourism, and to some extent this was started, and I appreciated at the time that the government included the THA negotiation with Sandals for a new hotel project around the area of Boko, right? And the Chief Secretary did say that they're still waiting for Sandals to continue the dialogue on the project. I don't know if the change of government affected the deal, because obviously, the people you're starting negotiating with changed. Maybe the terms that you were getting were so advantageous. Do you expect that you're not going to get it from the current administration? I'm speaking about Sandals itself. Granted, Sandals generally, they want to have things like tax breaks. It leaves me in a situation where, hey, why don't we consider that for our industry that's hanging on a nice edge? Especially since villas and guest houses don't pay hotel tax or VAT on income gained from commercial enterprise. Now, what is interesting to me in all this is Sandals is not the only project on the horizon. First of all, there's still the Marriott project. I believe the Chief Secretary now mentioned it. This is a project that it's, you know, at Back Bay, or also known as at Rocky Point, the Marriott Hotel. The location, first of all, there might be like artifacts in the location, the location having that much development on it. Not everybody is sold on that. And again, can you actually fill this? Now, it is in a better spot than Magdalena, because it's on the western side of the island. You're not necessarily going to have the same amount of sea blast, so your maintenance costs are not going to be as high. So your renovation costs and your need of renovation is not going to be as frequent and as high. But I still have doubts about this project because, again, where are the guests coming from? Because we've reached a point now where Caribbean Airlines, Airbridge, and the ferry sea bridge operations are not as high as it used to be. So can you fill more room capacity throughout the year? Because that's where most of your business month to month comes from. We can't say, oh, well, in January we're relatively full with foreigners. I don't even know how true that is anymore, to be honest, right? If there's any time when it's mostly foreigners filling the island. So we don't even have the capacity of our air and sea bridge to potentially fill what we have in Tobago currently. We're going to add another big hotel on top of, again, hopefully we get a Sandals, right? But then, what did I just say? This is on the West Coast. That's a better spot. The actual location itself, it's still questionable by people who live there and have environmental concerns and the like. But there's also now a Hilton planned in Roxborough. Now, one of the things with this Hilton is potentially, you see that image there with the white sand and blue water? The location is in between the mouths of 2 rivers, right? Not necessarily big rivers, but rivers nevertheless. Potentially, the sand is not going to be white. The water is not going to be crystal blue. Potentially, it's going to be silty and more like a dark brown, gray. Not necessarily as inviting. That's number one. Number two, it's going to be on the East Coast. To what extent is the sea blast that plagued Tobago Hilton into Magdalena now going to plague this Hilton? But more importantly, there are things like it's going to have 40 guest rooms, 126 fully furnished residences, 88 3-bedroom units, 38 2-bedroom units. Are these like long-term rental units or short? I assume it's going to be short-term rental units, right? Because it's a Hilton. Once you get to the 2-bedroom space for a family of 6 to 7, you're competing with villas, who again, what did I say? They don't pay hotel tax. They don't pay VAT. They just take their money and tax for commercial operations. because it's technically private residences, right? And what then happens is now this hotel will also have to compete with that to a greater degree than any hotel on the island. Because what exists does not necessarily have this extent of large accommodations. But again, it will be another large hotel. Where are we going to have the capacity for that? Okay, fine. The airport now, the new airport, in theory, has the capacity. Where are we going to get the guests? Is Cal going to put on more flights? Because unless you could figure out a way to balance the number of people going from Tobago to Trinidad when you have Trinidadians coming up to Tobago, if you don't balance out that equation of having people going back. Now, if it was the case that flights were weekly, so the flights that bring the new guests, and this is why the international market is so much more efficient and successful than the domestic market. The domestic market is you come up at the start of the weekend, you leave at the end of the weekend, but there's no counterbalance of traffic. Whereas internationally, you come in on a Friday, you leave on a Friday, and as you leave, somebody is coming in. That's traditionally how it worked. So the flight that is bringing you in is also the flight that's going to then take people out. So you don't have one leg empty. But in the domestic travel, when people are going back home Sunday, Monday, the flights coming to Tobago are relatively emptier. The flights going to Trinidad on a Friday, because the plane has to come back to take the next batch, the flights going to Trinidad on a Friday at times can be relatively emptier. And especially when you get to August, Easter, Christmas, and the traffic gets even at times more one way, and Carl is saying, we're taking losses, we're taking losses. So how much more capacity on the air bridge can we afford to put out there? Because again, we have things like education, crime, fire service needs more trucks, etc., etc. The ferry service is going to pick up the slack. Do people want to go on the ferry service? So when the Hotel Association says, hey, 10 million US for marketing, that ain't even a start, really. It would be a start, but it's not enough of a start. And if we really want to have all of these pipe dreams of multiple hotel projects and a new airport with 3 million people a year and all of that jazz, if we don't market the island, what's the point? We are not Ray Liotta. This is not some cornfield in middle America. We don't have some long dead Dodgers and Yankees baseball players going to play so that random people will come and fill in the stands. We're talking about a major industry that is a relative unknown. 2025, we're part of the Commonwealth. We have Olympians and Miss Universe winners, and yet we are an unknown quantity in the world, relatively speaking. And we expect that we'll just magically get tourists out of nowhere. Good luck with that. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll switch gears. Stay tuned. This is Dr. WSN Show, Michael Small. We'll be right back after this.
Something very important, there is an intrinsic neurotrophic factor that is released via myokines, that is some peptides that we have in our muscle that produce neuromodulation and increase that peptide in the brain to increase the neurocognitive of the brain.
I'm glad you said that, right. So exercise has an important part to play in the aging brain. As we get older, our gray matter does shrink, we have reduction of synapses, but exercise is shown to actually improve our cognitive functioning.
Totally.
Feeling drained? Struggling to keep up? It's time to take control of your wellness. On this episode of Wellness Unlocked, we're diving into the key nutrients your body needs for all-day energy and balance. With 100% or more of your daily essential vitamins, plus added chromium to support healthy blood sugar, this is complete wellness in a single soft gel. Join us as we uncover how small changes can make a big impact on your health. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
This is 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
I'm back here on WSN Talking Point is here with our disaster management expert and also retired, semi-retired, soon to be fully retired, not yet fully retired, Inspector Ashraf Ali. Good morning.
Morning, Sean. How are you?
Now, a couple of things to talk about. Let me just pull it up here. There's a couple of things I want to. First of all, and I saw that there was an article. I think Professor Diosaran kind of called it out, but it's one of those things where we have to be careful. You know, the low-hanging fruit of wanting to just condemn the situation might be too far. I'm speaking about the probe into the Brent Thomas affair. And there's been some questions. Now, I had questions, but they were literally more like open-ended questions. I'm not advocating for any actual course of action, but rather just clarity. There's a probe into the Brent Thomas affair. DCP Martin is identified as one of the officers involved. She is still currently working as DCP Intelligence and Investigations. Of course, now part of the question comes from the layman who's like, but when you investigated Ayla, you suspend she. Now the commissioner has come out and said, and assuming that he was quoted correctly, he said, well, it's up to the Police Service Commission to discipline officers. And I was like, well, technically no, but it's up to the Police Service Commission to discipline the executive. They have the authority over the DCP. So the spirit of what he was trying to say was correct. Yes. It is up to the Police Service Commission in this case. And I did wonder, well, is it the Service Commission realize, hey, we kind of jumped the gun with Ayla. Let's not make that same mistake twice. Because, again, to some extent, it is innocent until proven guilty. You know, I always say that regardless of what I think about the individual involved, we can't look to now just, you know, suspend or ignore our rights when the mood suits us. That would be, you know, detrimental to everybody in the long term. So in a case like this, you know, it's kind of, I'm not too sure how bad is it. She's under investigation, but she's still part of the executive to help deal with crime. So it is a hard pill to swallow.
It is, and from the public perspective, there's a lot of questions and a lot of questions to be asked, specifically as to whether or not she should be in office or she should not be in office. When you set certain type of precedents and you don't continue with the type of precedents that has been set, standards, you lower your standards and you try to defend your action with the standards that were set, you put yourself in a very precarious position, because at the end of the day, you start to erode a little more of the confidence and trust that the investigation will go the way, or should be as fair and transparent as it could be. No, not start saying that the commissioner did in fact, and I would give kudos to him in the manner in which he handled the question that was posed to him, is that he did in fact indicate that the investigation, he wants to be very transparent, and the investigation is being, and I'm just paraphrasing, not his words exactly. He wants to make it transparent, right? And the investigation has been assigned to an assistant commissioner of police. When the question was posed to him about suspension and otherwise, he didn't indicate that that has been left to the Service Commission, which is right. The deputy commissioner's discipline or any action falls within the ambits of the Police Service Commission. He did in fact indicate that he wrote to them indicating the circumstances, and he's leaving it up to the Police Service Commission to take the action, if any, with respect to the DCP. And I think that is fair, that is reasonable, and I think he was very professional in the way that he took that question and how he answered that question. That's kudos to him, because he was right in that aspect of it. Any questions, and he also told the reporter when I heard that any questions specifically towards that issue, address it straight to the Police Service Commission, which was right.
Yes.
Right? Because he cannot speak on what action they can or they cannot take. The perception is that if you're under investigation does not mean guilty or innocent. It simply means that if you're under investigation, the portfolio that you may hold in a particular location, and this is not in the police service alone, it could be in any other organization, based on the portfolio that you hold, there is a perception that you or the portfolio that you hold, based on the investigation and the basic type of investigation that is being conducted in the office that you held, it can be compromised, or there might be biasness or not enough transparency in it. So from that perspective, you may the public is asking why that individual, why the DCP is still holding the office. And it's reasonable to ask those questions. It's reasonable. But at the end of the day, I agree with the commissioner. Police Service Commissioner has to take that action.
So could it be, because first of all, I'm not saying the situation is less severe or less important than the earlier investigation, right? I think to some extent they're very different. How severe they are could be equal, one could be more than the other. But one of the differences I want to point to is the fact that when Erla was under investigation, you had that additional complication that, well, she's the most senior police officer. And the person investigating her is technically her subordinate, but it's also someone at that number 2 level, right? That second level of the police service. That is a lot more complicated than this situation where it's the DCP being investigated. She still has a boss, right, in the police service. So you're not thinking, oh, well, it's the senior police service. How is the police investigating their boss? You know, no. Technically, someone superior to her is essentially on the police end there to oversee the investigation. It's not now someone subordinate to her just going off on their own to say, oh, I'm going to investigate you, right? And the complication, yes, there's the complication of how DCP Martin potentially did it, unless we find out that she was acting under instructions from somebody. But more importantly, is the fact that the person that's the subject of the investigation, the difference of being a DCP and being the commissioner just makes it that much more complicated. Because how could you, I could understand where the Police Service Commission may have perceived how, and the police service could have perceived, how could we ensure the public believes that this is an investigation that's in good faith and that Erla is not going to potentially, you know, influence it in some way? Well, we have to suspend her to remove her from the equation. The current commissioner is a third party. He's already outside of the equation. So maybe that could be one of the things under consideration?
I would say that was probably some things that the commissioner would have considered at the same time. Yes, we will always have detractors of how it took place because the public is still using the parallel with former Commissioner Earl Christopher and in this situation. I would say that I am hopeful that the level of transparency that is needed to clear the air, not specifically about the DCP, but the circumstance surrounding that entire incident involving the firearm dealer. That incident itself speaks volumes to the level of authority and the extent to which you may go beyond your authority vested on you to do certain things. That is a bigger picture, I think, that the bigger question that a lot of persons is asking, under what authority and who gave those directives to do such an act, or take such action, I should say.
And just explain why that is a question to you, because as you pointed out before, it's not like she could have just done it on her own. Why is that?
It is because of the procedure and protocol required to take action against a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago who is in another jurisdiction, exercising the authority in another jurisdiction by going to another jurisdiction and arresting and detaining that individual. It doesn't happen just by picking up yourself and going out, just jumping in a plane, leaving the jurisdiction, going to another jurisdiction and picking up somebody and bringing them back. There's a lot of things that a lot of authorities, permissions, and persons would have known at different levels in national security as to how to, because you use different assets and resources that needed specific permissions.
They didn't even fly commercial.
No.
They took a regional plane.
So it means that there's a lot more that it was being presented, and I am hoping that the investigation into this clear the air in the context of not whether she was right or wrong. That is not my issue, is not whether I was right or wrong. In the context of the actions that was taken, because from a citizen's perspective, in trusting and in developing trust and confidence in our institutions, that we have some level of trust and confidence that they can act fairly and within the ambits of the law. That is the biggest question. Because if this action was not within the ambits of the law, then somebody has to answer questions as to why.
Because, generally speaking, TTPS has no jurisdiction in Barbados to make arrests.
No, they don't.
So legally, Barbadian authorities, it would be under the authority of the government of Barbados and the agents of the government of Barbados, their police, to arrest him, and then you have the extradition proceedings, generally speaking, to bring him back to TNT. So I don't know if I've ever asked you directly on this part of it, because I know we've spoken about it before when it happened, particularly when it now came to light, and you brought up that reasoning from even then. But the fact that Barbados, their AG basically told the government, don't even fight it. Brent Thomas come in with a complaint against you in the courts, don't even fight it. Let's settle this thing. We don't even have, it seems like we don't even have a leg to stand on. Let's not even try. What kind of implication that has now? Because again, in theory, it's their jurisdiction, so it's their powers of arrest that was needed in this situation for it to be legal. So the fact that they're conceding defeat without even trying, what are the implications further now on our domestic situation and the questions you just posed?
Well, it speaks volumes, because in that aspect of it, the Barbadian authority made it abundantly clear. They didn't indicate whether it was right or wrong. They just said that they're going to leave it as it is. Because conversation had to be held from a Caribbean agency's perspective, international and regional agency perspective, in and out, how to treat it, a matter of that nature. If it is that they were not given proper information, they decided, listen, let us not go beyond our scope. We will treat with it from a different perspective. And they did, in fact, say, hey, hold your horses on this one. Let's concede on the action, and we'll sort it out from a different perspective. This is what I'm saying, that there's a lot more questions that the authorities in Trinidad and Tobago has to answer to with respect to how this action and who, how, when, why this was allowed to happen. This is not, and I'm saying, this is just not about Suzette, the DC, sorry, I don't want to mention the name, I apologize, the DCP anymore. It's about the actions taken by the authorities. This is not just...
But to be fair, even from the beginning, before we knew who was involved, you had some of these same questions.
Yes.
Because you identify from the beginning, the police can't just pick up themselves, go to Barbados and arrest anybody on their own.
We have a Interpol department within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, interagency work together. When we have to execute an Interpol warrant, they would send information, they would send a complete bio on an individual, what they're looking for from the origin, the law enforcement agency, and send information, and a lot of information as to what way, together with supporting documents, why they need this individual, right? And the local authority would execute based on the documentation provided and hand over to because you need documentation, you need authorities.
Because people think, oh, Interpol is international police. Well, they don't actually go around the world arresting people.
No, they don't.
Right? They depend on the local police to actually do that part of it. They don't have the authority, right?
They do not. So this is how it operates. So once you prepare, and that is how you need authorities, you need written documentation, not word of mouth, written documentation for you to take the appropriate action within the laws of your land, because their laws might be different to yours.
Because essentially, I think one of the things that has been downplayed is this is technically an international incident that potentially embarrassed the state of Barbados.
And this is why I continue to say, when you are managing incidents, and this is what you call a critical incident because it has international implication, regional implication for law enforcement and how they treat with certain things. The use of the word of kidnapping came into play, right? Criminal offenses came into was banded about, breaches of constitutional rights. These are serious implications, because this is just not someone breaking into your, executing a simple warrant in your house, in your jurisdiction. No. This is talking about going to another jurisdiction in another country and acting, detaining an individual and bringing back that individual back to this country without proper documentation, as the case may be.
Proper due process.
And due process. So it is a critical incident. It has to be aired. It has to be addressed. And whatever is the outcome of it, it must set standards and precedents and revisit some of our protocols as to how we take matters of this nature or incidents of this nature and how we treat with it. Because with crime, which is international, right, cross-jurisdictional, cross-border, things of this nature may happen again.
Well, not just that. To some extent, we just had a situation where the United States Embassy applauded our part to play in a drug bust in Portugal. I believe it was $25 million US in cocaine, a 2-year operation. It highlights one of the things that I'm pointing out, that we need our international partners because our crime problem is beyond our borders, right? And this will speak to how it is now do we responsibly engage with our partners, because basically, depending on how the actual version of events, which we might never fully get aired to the public, Trinidad went on an adventure in Barbados while potentially complicit in it. It might not have been something that, you know, they actively wanted to do. So now we have a regional partner basically saying, hey, next time TNT want to send a request, we need to like take extra time to scrutinize it, you know? And if it takes too long for them, tough luck, because they set the precedent that we don't want to allow to happen in the future again.
And that's a reality. That is a reality that our regional counterparts, law enforcement counterparts, may look towards, because if we could make errors in this matter, they don't want to be put in the limelight in another situation.
I just want to say, when you say errors, folks, he's being generous, right? Right? He's saying, you know, that just at that level alone, it's an issue. So if it's worse than that, it's a bigger issue. Yeah. One of the last things on this I want to ask, though, because you mentioned before, the precedent kind of was set, the public wants to see the precedent. But to be fair to the Police Service Commission, which technically I find myself, you know, I wasn't speaking like this a few days ago, but we have to be fair. And to some extent, I did bring this up indirectly. The blowback on when IRLA was suspended and how that was handled, there was a lot of negative perception by how it was handled. So to some extent, it's kind of weird that the public, and I know this is a very real phenomenon, we want to see the standard, the precedent set be consistent, but we had an issue with it the first time. So is it realistic for us to really want to see it consistent the second time, to see the same thing?
I think there was a lot more leading up to this incident with Ulla Christopher, not specifically towards that incident, but everything else was happening with crime and the manner in which the crime rate and a lot of negative press in how the Office of the Commissioner was handling certain situations and handling these situations. I think all of that was, or I should say, added to the situation. When the incident took place and it was and the commissioner was arrested, you got empathy towards how the action was taken. So you got a different side of it with respect to that. And I'm saying that there's a lot more behind of it than that led to the final arrest.
Right.
There was a lot of other issues that were just thrown into the basket together.
Right, whether rightfully or wrongfully.
Right, wrongfully. In this situation, the matter with Brent Thomas was left dormant for a little while.
Yeah.
It was everyone, a number of persons was awaiting when would this matter be brought to the fore. The irony is that, or I should say, unfortunately for our Commissioner of Police at this point in time, as soon as he took office, he got that on his chest immediately, and he did the most professional thing that a professional and ethical thing to do by appointing an investigator or causing an investigation to be dealt with and send it straight to the Service Commission to address with it. He is keeping, in my opinion, removing himself from the controversy that took place with respect to that and trying to be as objective and transparent as the case may be. The final issue would be the outcome of it. And if the outcome, once a lot of persons may not like the outcome, some persons may want the outcome. But at the end of the day, if the investigation, and I'm hopeful that the persons involved in the investigation is transparent enough to make and do the needful, and the public is satisfied with the outcome and the results of the outcome, because persons don't really want to hear that she arrested and charged for something, alone,
They want a proper foundation.
People want to know how this happened.
Yes.
And why was it allowed to happen, and who else was involved. They don't want to scapegoat alone.
Right. That's what I was now going to say. that if she's just arrested and you hear nothing else about it, there's no other information, then she's just being scapegoated. And that doesn't really solve the issue of not allowing it to happen again.
No, it does not.
Now, one of the things, though, that I want to point out, the arrest and court matter, if it happens, that might be the end result. Whoever's arrested, it might not be the DCP, it might be somebody else who is more culpable in the situation, who gave instructions, we don't know. But I think before that, though, there's also the unfortunate realization that either Mr. Thomas decided he had to wait until a change in government and a change in substantive commissioner to make his report, or he did attempt to make a report in the past, and it was essentially or potentially ignored or buried by either the last substantive commissioner or the acting commissioner in between, right? So I also think there's further implications there, because what you pointed out, that certain things was lumped into Erla's situation and her arrest, well, other things could be lumped into this situation with regards to, one, the arrest of Erla, and potentially looking to see exactly what happened there and, you know, how above board it was, right? Although they might not have the same kind of leeway to go into that, but publicly, that's going to be a factor. But then also the wider dimension or question of political interference in the police, which started from the meritless situation. Because I'll just say this, whether you like Guy Griffith or not, he proved to me that he was capable of independent thought. He was capable of diplomatically communicating his independent positions, not wanting to be caught now, potentially where the DCP finds herself. So, where you take instructions, you don't necessarily understand that, hey, I don't have cover, or you willfully don't care that you don't have legal cover. And now, governments change. You're not going to be covered all the time. Not everybody gets away scot-free, depending on what you may or may not have done, whether intentionally or not, whether willfully or unintentionally, unknowingly.
Well, like I said, we didn't normally say in the police service, never a dull moment. Right?
No, it's supposed to be dull. Excitement in policing is, too much excitement is bad for one's health.
There's never a dull moment.
Oh,
right? So I wait, just like the rest of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, to see what is the outcome of it. I would say that I am giving my 100% support to the Commissioner of Police, our current Commissioner of Police. He started off on a good footing. I'm seeing that he is getting involved by actually going to the stations, find out what is taking place, getting to the ground,
yes,
right, meeting and greeting the officers, and you know, trying to get a sense of what is the moral and what is the current issues within the organization. I do not expect that he can fix every single thing with a flick of a thumb, or because at the end of the day, some of the things that need to be remedied in the police service is costly. Yes. And with respect to the budgetary allocations right now, we are the reality is that we're in a bad place.
Well, I want to, with the time we have left, I want to go there, but I'll just say this. Erla, basically, you kind of knew she was on a short leash just because of where her retirement was and how many extensions she could have gotten. The current commissioner, I think, is 59. So in theory, he has something like 13 to 14 years, because after he reaches retirement age, they could extend him a couple more years after that. So he's not as transient. He doesn't need to have a 1 year, crime plan. He could have a 5-year, 10-year plan, right?
And I'm hopeful that he, with all his experience, and he would have seen and sat on his sidelines within the organization, not the proverbial sideline, but because he has been in the administrative aspect of it and the executive, part of the executive, coming up the ranks, understanding what needs to be done and how to change some of the, or how to potentially change the dynamics of policing at this point in time, because we need to change.
Yeah.
We just can't keep doing the same thing over and over. So I'm hopeful that he can think out the box.
Speaking of change, Homeland Security Minister met with Guidepost Solutions a couple days ago. Apparently they're looking to bring recommendations for new technologies for crime fighting. One of the things that I thought about, because, There's a war going on in Europe. I don't know if you heard about it. You know, Russia decided to have a little difference of opinion with Ukraine. And one of the things in that war, while a lot of people think this is the future of war, I think yes and no, because wars have their unique aspects. But undoubtedly, the use of drones has exploded. It's not just the military drones that the Americans use. They make a use of commercial drones. And this, I said it yesterday, military technology tends to trickle down to law enforcement and even civilian use. And it would just make sense that all of the innovations now into drones will now allow for governments to maybe utilize this technology in a lot of other areas. The easiest low-hanging fruit is policing, because we lament the fact, at least some of us like myself, we can't afford a fleet of police helicopters, which would be very useful, but it's very expensive. People derided the blimp. Oh my gosh, how silly the blimp. What is this, the 1920s? Although it made it was not a completely useless idea.
No, it is not.
But with drones now, you have something that might be even more affordable, right?
We have to
depending on how it's implemented.
We have to understand something, that when you say the use of drones, I mean, the drones that we are talking about is not the drones you could go and buy in the toy store.
No.
Right? They are because they are drones you could buy in toy store that can give you what you want out of it. Right? In the entertainment industry, we have drones. They have drones, and drones are used in the entertainment,
yes,
and assisting movies and something like that. So, military drones, or should I say drones used in law enforcement, I would leave military drones out of it, because the drones in for military use would be a bit more different than the use of ones for
purpose-built ones.
Purpose-built
because
ones.
they are jerry-rigging civilian ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but the ones that use for law enforcement purposes have to be specifically targeted and I should say, not built for purpose, but can give the achieve the objectives of law enforcement. And law enforcement requires drones for surveillance, surveillance from the perspective of covert surveillance. You can utilize it for covert surveillance.
True, although that has a lot of legal complications.
Right, but I'm just throwing out some of the contexts in which the drones could be used. We have drones that we can utilize for when we're doing overview of major events.
Yes.
Right, assist in crowd control, crowd management, and directing resources. When we have traffic management,
yeah,
drones can be utilized for that purpose. It is also utilized in disaster management when you want to do overhead, because it is easy to turn up a drone and look at the area and get a visual of where the issue is when it comes to disaster management.
It might be hard for you to drive into a flooded area.
Possibly in search and rescue situations, not in the police service. If we have missing persons or we have persons in the area, drones can be utilized in that aspect of it, to assist in some of the terrain that it is difficult to go. You can use drones to monitor and look at it from that. So drones has a very...
well, there was one aspect that, because I had two clips in the States on how at least the police in the States, at least a few months ago, were using it. It was a first responder situation, because now, it costs a lot for a helicopter just be hovering.
Yes.
But generally speaking, you can't wait for something to happen to say, let's take off in the helicopter, right? You kind of have to have the helicopter patrolling. But with drones, you could very easily say, oh, there's an incident. We have drones located in police stations around the country. The nearest one now, somebody in the command center takes off and essentially fulfills the helicopter role in first responding to an incident and could potentially get there faster than police officers having to drive on the ground.
So, are you aware that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service does in fact have a air support unit that utilizes drones?
Oh.
So they do in fact have it.
But how do they use it though? Because
and some of the areas that I just mentioned is because I am fully aware of how it is. So I gave you the areas at which can be utilized and has been utilized over the years. Right? The challenge, I should say, challenge is that the type of drones that you need for the duration of time that you want it for, it cannot be used for traffic management or long-term surveillance, because The drones have a battery life,
Yes.
and there's a distance that it can cover. So it means that
there are more expensive drones that
Yes.
potentially can do that.
So it may be used for a short-term period, specific to an event or that has been used. So it has been used for Carnival on a regular basis.
Right.
The drone unit.
Are they centrally controlled?
Yes, they are centrally and manned by a team of officers.
The reason why I say that is you don't have to launch them by an officer in the field. They could launch from a nearby location.
The unit possesses the drones because it's a unit that has the drones, and they are utilized in different areas. And they have been doing a lot of work with it. And they have been very successful in some of the activities with the utilization of the drones. However, if we want to expand the scope of the drones to replace or fill the gap that is existing with the helicopters,
or the lack
thereof, it means that the type of drones that is required, the duration of the drones and how long those drones have to remain on the air for the purpose of it.
Now, I was thinking in the reverse. I was thinking that if you just have, now obviously you don't need an army of drones in every police station. You only need a couple, right? So potentially when one battery runs out, you could trade them off. So at least you'll have like a few to give you, as much coverage as possible. But you're only gonna have like 3, 4 in each location. But I think the key would be how many locations could you afford to have it so that you're not trying to fly 15 minutes to respond to an incident.
The drones are not supposed to be a response. It's not supposed to be a response. It's a support mechanism. It's a support mechanism, a support for the response. So we have to be careful, because the misconception is that a person will say, well, we have drones, we could see everything. I mean, that is going to be a misconception because of the fact that there's a lot of different things that work. Now, the unit is a very small unit. It cannot cover, because we do not have units or personnel in the 10 divisions in Trinidad and Tobago.
Is it based on division?
No, it's a unit. And they
what I mean to say, the operations, is it based on division or is it in the national operations
No,
center?
it's a mobile. They are mobile, so they can go to any division.
Because this is what New York did. In their police operations center, that's where all the stations are. The drones are physically throughout the city.
See, we have,
we haven't necessarily, don't have the infrastructure.
So you're carrying me
into sources.
You're carrying me into an area that I am very passionate about, because I was in charge of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Operation Command Center, and there's a lot of issues because we are talking technology, and we don't want to invest in the type of technology required to do the work that we expect the technology to bring. Technology is not cheap alone. With the type of technology for law enforcement, we talk about data collection for evidential purposes, because you don't just fly drones for entertainment.
Right.
So you fly the drones for the purpose of surveillance, as well as they may utilize it for evidential value. With that, it brings into the context of how you keep the footage from the drones, how you prepare it, how you present that to the court if required. Just like the body cameras.
Not just that, it's also how high definition cameras you have, what other sensors you have on the drones, and that adds to the cost. I saw one website had police drones being, well, you could start at $1,000 US, but then you could go to 10,000 to 30,000 US. Still cheaper than a helicopter.
Exactly. So then there are also UAVs, unmanned drones that can be utilized now, and I know the discussions they were having some discussions, and I saw one of them for Carnival when Mr. Gary Griffith was around. Right, that the drones can be flown on the coastal areas.
Yes.
That can be manned from a particular location and has a flight time that can assist in giving some surveillance on the borders, on our coastal borders, which could give some value, as well as not the normal drones, because I mean those drones flying along our coastal areas will be impacted by the winds,
yeah.
right? So you need more stability, more drones with a better stability that can utilize there.
Those would be more fixed-wing drones that would be closer to like a plane than a quadcopter.
Exactly. So they
would be more expensive.
They would be more expensive, but it brings more value in the long term in terms of that.
But part of it too is, because I mentioned this, and you could speak more to this than me. Now, first of all, I think what I am hoping for the TTPS to use as drones might be maybe a step beyond where they are currently. But it's not just that. There's also the fact that if we have a drone program, we could maybe experience a little bit of economies of scale, because, as you pointed out, we could also have coastal patrols. But then what might make those long-range drones more tenable is those drones might also potentially could be used for disaster management, search and rescue, and the like. When you're trying to find someone in the woods,
exactly.
You know, you want to have the endurance to stay up for a long time and to go far distances to try to give you the best chance to find the person, to find the best chance to find survivors in a disaster, you know, to make sure you're not limited by anything, because time, every minute counts.
And drones do in fact have been utilized in disaster. We have a lot of, but at the same time, we have to be cautious, because under the Civil Aviation Authority,
that's the other thing.
There are regulations and requirements for rules how to utilize drones in certain areas. There are certain areas, like the city of Port of Spain. It's a no-fly zone for drones.
Yeah.
You have to get special permissions and all that.
So people might not understand, but you're the police. What do you mean you need to get special permissions? Because New York Police Department, they got a 1-year license about 7 months ago, because the amount of airplanes flying overhead. Yes. This is not an automatic thing, and airplanes at times end up flying in proximity to Port of Spain.
So a lot of persons may not be familiar, but a drone operator, an authorized drone operator, I'm not talking about just anybody else, I'm just saying an authorized drone operator from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service are qualified pilots.
Right, yes.
They have to go through the training and be certified by the Civil Aviation to be qualified to fly drones, because as everything else, when you are manning these equipments, there's a risk associated.
It could fall.
It can fall. It could injure persons, and we have some challenges with it.
If you're trying to get coverage of a scene in Piarco and you fly in the path of a landing plane, that could be bad.
That could be extremely bad.
But also, hey, maybe this is how we could actually have an air guard. Just saying.
Just saying.
Just saying. Defense Force could get on the action too. We have San Fernando on the line. We'll take the call. Good morning, caller. You on the air.
Morning, Sean.
Morning.
Morning, Mr. Ali.
Morning, sir.
Let me start. Very interesting morning with Sean's topics. Let me start with the most recent, the police service and use of or what you all call drones. Let me say this. We in Trinidad and Tobago, we need additional air support for surveillance in the police service. I agree with that. But we do not need, there are some instances where we may be able to utilize drones, but what we need is really unmanned aerial vehicles, not drones. And there's a difference in the two. And that thing you talk about with Gary Griffith there, when he was there and they used it for, you remember for Carnival they had used some drones?
Yeah.
Some associates of mine, we had sent a proposal to Mr. Griffith for unmanned aerial vehicles. They are much more costly and they are much more difficult to get. That thing you talked about, Sean, that you have drones and they go up to 30,000. Unmanned aerial vehicles is a totally different aspect.
Yeah.
That is where you have, those are defense companies in the US and like in Israel and stuff that they get them. Mm-hmm. And you have to, and there's a lot of security. It more entails diplomatic arrangements first Because what we need is we need something at height and something at time. So what we need is a vehicle that can get a call, that a department that can get a call or a unit, and they send out the equipment, and the equipment can go out and stay for 4 hours. Because we look at Trinidad here, and we could probably have one in Tobago. So the equipment can leave whatever the point is, and it can stay airborne for 4 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours. There are those things available, but the cost and the maintenance, I don't think the police service it can handle that in the budget because they are very costly. But the idea of using unmanned aerial vehicles has been touted, and I think it was stayed away from. And there are other issues which I wouldn't discuss here about it. The second thing is what you call it? That Brent Thomas affair. Let me say this about the new commissioner of police. I was quite disappointed in listening when the commissioner was questioned by the reporter. And let me tell you why. The commissioner tried to put the ball in the court of the Police Service Commission when he was asked about Ms. Martin being on active duty while Mr. Simon carrying out this investigation. What bothered me is that what I didn't hear from the commissioner, he said that the information that he got from Mr. Thomas's attorneys, he sent it to the Police Service Commission for them to make a decision. Mm-hmm. He never said that he requested the Police Service, because he can't do that. The commissioner can write the Police Service Commissioner requesting that Miss Martin be sent on leave while this investigation is secret. He can't do that, and then they will respond accordingly. But he did not say he did that.
No,
the parallels that Sean you made with in terms of Lola Christopher's issue and Suzette Martin issue, there are two different issues. One is Miss Christopher was arrested, or detained and arrested while she was on active duty.
Yes.
She was on active duty. The Police Service Commission didn't go to the Service Commission and they suspended her, or they put her on the activator, and then they took, it was a totally different thing. And the third thing about this issue is, let me say this. This is about politics. This is about politics. It was about politics when Ms. Martin was sent to bring back Mr. Thomas, and I say that deliberately. She was sent to bring back Mr. Thomas, and now the same thing, politics again. Ms. Martin, while she did, in my opinion, it was an overreach. Ms. Martin was the puppet, and the puppeteers are who we want to find out are. We want to find out who the puppeteers are. And thirdly, Sean, my favorite topic with you, Tobago tourism. Sean, let me say this, one of the things that nobody wants to hear, and it has to happen if you want to start to have Caribbean Airlines consider doing some stuff on the air bridge, they have to raise the airfare to Tobago from where it is to, let me finish first, to the break-even cost, the Caribbean Airlines break-even cost. The last thing I know about that, it was about $700.
Yeah.
Now, and then if the THA wants to subsidize the people coming down, for the Tobagonians coming down, they can make an arrangement with Caribbean Airlines to do that, to subsidize that part. But it has to be raised firstly. Now, that hotel in Rocky Point, the Marriott, that's a private entity. That is Trinidadians who have the money, decided they want to put a hotel in Tobago, and don't worry, just like how Sanders knew how they were going to get the tourists there, they know they're going to get the tourists there. Also, Mr. Stewart, let me say this quickly. Mr. Stewart ain't coming to Tobago to build no hotel. Let me say this. There are no Sandals coming in Tobago. Unless this government really try to massage that issue. Because, remember, Sandals have, I don't know if you know this, Sandals already have 5 or 6 projects before they consider Tobago project, you know, that are already in train. 5 or 6 of them are already in train. And that Mr. Stewart coming to Tobago was a courtesy to a businessman in Trinidad who Dr. Rowley and they have a relationship with. And it was a courtesy because that businessman, Mr. Stewart's father, had a long-standing relationship. These are no Sandals coming into Tobago in a hurry. Let me just say that. I hear you say, just talk about the $10 million that the association are asking for. But let me ask you this, Sean. Do you know how much money that the THA and that tourism authority spends on marketing for Tobago? You have any idea?
None, because I see no results from any marketing initiatives. So
because even in the last THA budget, I didn't see a number. I didn't see a number in the budget for it.
My assumption, to some extent, based on the lack of either information directly or seeing the back end of the results, seeing ads, seeing a slogan, seeing any kind of campaign, even the thought of a campaign, not even implemented, just, well, we crafted one, we just didn't do it. Haven't even seen that. So as far as I'm aware, and I could be wrong, and no one has told me different, none. There is no marketing budget for the country's tourism. Apart
from the when they go to that show in London and they go to the one in the US, which is basically THA members and they tag along a few people from the association.
When you run trade shows, right? Yeah. That's it. But I'm speaking about actual marketing.
Yes,
billboards,
ads,
TV, magazines, maybe in
Caribbean beats. I have to concede that when you said it the last time, when I said that money should be spent on upgrades, and I went and you said it, and I went and looked a little more into it. I have to concede with you that really they need to, that money really is needed. That 10 million US, as you said, at minimum, is really needed to advertise Tobago, because Tobago is woefully absent on the international advertising scale for the Caribbean, you know.
Yes.
They really are. I have to agree with you. Have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Sanfano, one of the things, well, before you go, or you could go, but one of the things is Tobago is constantly one of the best kept secrets of the Caribbean, which translates as to nobody knows about it. But worst off, not just people don't know about it, but it has so much to offer. It has so much to provide for tourists and for customers that they would love to participate in. That's why it's not just a secret. It's one of the best secrets of the Caribbean.
Let me say this one thing before I go, Sean. I just said that. Is it that the people who need to make the decision want to keep it a secret?
I don't know if they directly want to do it, but indirectly, their choices more or less give us that result. Because Dutch disease, we prioritize other things. Tourism. And to some extent, the labor force in Tobago, a lot less than before, they don't want jobs in tourism. What's that? They want a government job.
So true.
Right? The thing is, yes, Sandals, it was very attractive because Sandals was going to build it, as opposed to the Tobago Hilton where we built it and we owned it. And when Hilton said, well, we're not paying for your renovations, y'all could keep it. Well, yeah, we got stuck with a Magdalena now that we renovated and we want to somehow find a sucker to buy, right? Listen, it could be viable if we had the traffic, which we don't. The idea about the THA subsidizing Tobagonian travel, that's a good idea. I'll say this, I think the reason why it's $700 a ticket is because of the unbalance. If it was balanced, so full planes going up, full planes coming down all the time, that would be different. I don't know if we could ever figure a way to make it so. Maybe the ticket prices need to be flexible, and yes, certain legs have to be more expensive, like more expensive to go up with the traffic, more expensive to come down with the traffic, but vice versa, it would be cheaper because it would be empty otherwise, right? So why not at least do that? You might get more money to fill those seats. We haven't really seen that kind of flexible, innovative approach. With regards to Susan Martin, I'll just say this and then we'll take the call. She may have been instructed to go to Barbados, but technically speaking, following illegal orders in principle is not really a legal defense. I'm not saying that's what she did. I'm just saying the principle of the matter, right? So to what extent she could say, well, I was just following orders. Yeah, tell that to some of the people in Germany post-1945, how well that went for them, right? Because they were all just following orders. It's a very extreme example. I apologize if it offends anybody, but I needed to make a point because we have Davide on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on the air.
Good morning. Like, they have no consideration for Davide at all. Pleasant morning to Sean, you and ASP Ashraf.
Well, I just want to say,
similar to my friend in San Fernando. Yeah, Sean, I want to deal with the tourism first, as you're talking about, and Sandal is not a philanthropist. Mr. Stewart is a businessman. There's business in Tobago, and Sandal will come to Tobago. And the THA does have a line item with respect to marketing, and if you realize that a lot of us spoke against the carnival that they're having at the end of the year, that has been growing immensely, from the pan to local tourism and everything like that. So the tourism industry will continue to grow. Also, the ships that come in will continue to increase. So I tend to share a different point of opinion with that. The issue with Ms. Martin now and the Barbados thing, I think that it was an error and it was a learning experience, and we should put it to rest. I think what we need to concentrate on now is the fraud charges with the BIR and this gun dealer. I want to go to the technology part of it for the police service. ASP Ashraf, I agree with you totally. I think that more money needs to be invested. If you're serious about fighting crime, then you need to go all the way. There are certain areas within Trinidad and Tobago that the drone will see how persons are operating and walking with their AK and stuff through all the different back streets and the housing development and them that were unplanned, that you're passing through track. But although you're passing through track, Sean, these guys and them are at different points with their submachine guns. Commissioner and his hiring, I must say though that the commissioner is on the right track. I like the idea how the commissioner is actually on the ground. He's leading by example and might make some mistakes along the way, but he's on the right track. I think what he needs though is to have that level of support from his colleagues there in the executive branch of the TTPS. So guys, thanks for allowing me my contribution, and I pray that you all have a blessed day. Thanks a lot.
We have a couple callers, but I'll quickly say this. The Brent Thomas issue is not just about Suzette Martin. She's just the highest ranked person involved, not just in the police. So the investigation starts there, but as Ashraf was kind of implying, the political dimension, we need answers for that. The breach in policy goes beyond her involvement. Because yes, we all acknowledge she didn't do it on her own. I think that's one of the things that we all agree on. So this is not something that we could just leave alone, because again, if she was arrested and convicted, she would just be a scapegoat. That's not what we want to see. It's how this happened. We have two callers on the line. Caller, go ahead. Good morning.
Oh, While I was on hold for 2 years, somebody points I want to raise, already raised, right? It was very good, no problem with that. I have no quarrel with that at all. Except to say that while I agree with the officer there that we should encourage a lot more technology in the pipes, but we have the technology now, partner. We have more than we ever even want to use. There's technology that can pinpoint any car that's traveling on the highway that have ammunition or a gun in it.
Where we have that, sir?
All right, I will tell you. We have it in Israel.
In where?
And we have it otherwise, but we don't want to have it here. You know why? Because somebody. Anyway, let me go. I just say.
I think he's saying it exists.
Exists. I'm just saying we don't have the technology in Trinidad.
You see, so what I have seen where we could have that here instead of going through all that drone drama and helicopter and all that kind of thing. That was a simple thing. That's a simple thing. Israel have it. We import things from Israel already before a man passing on the road with a thing like looking like a hairdryer. I pointed to your house. He could tell which room we're in, who you're talking to, and what number it is in, all of that. Why we don't have that here? Anyway.
Some of the things you're talking about, caller, might not be easily utilized by law enforcement legally.
All right, let me move on. That seems to be a little bit high. Let me move on. Now, the question of that DCP and Barbados and so on, I ain't calling no name, but I will tell you this. Yeah, something telling me, when in the absence of getting information, proper information, you will have to form your own opinion. My opinion is that have a large input, clearly. Because when you are a call partner, it could be Prime Minister, it could be taxi driver, wherever he is, you have to go and assist and do what is necessary. So nobody can do nothing. I am telling you today, Magdalene, not a single thing will come out of that. Because that large input is the same thing that can be for the last 10 years, partner, and it still exists. Why do you think all these things could happen and nobody can get charged? Nobody can do nothing. I ain't seen my boy next door involved in that because he looked like a street fella. But I just say that we know, all of we went to school, we know what to expect. We tick what to expect next time. How come that all of these things could be happening? Big gun passing up and everybody know and the police don't know? I beg to disagree, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. I will say this. I can't say that it is or is not any institution or NGO, as you've named, that is directly involved. But I will say that the principle of what you just said potentially is not wrong and can be very right. But I won't go into the particulars of applying those principles and how it might be right. I'm just saying, I don't know if that means that nothing can come of it. But I'm just saying, your theory and principle might not be wrong. It might be very correct, right? At least with part of the why and how this started. We have Trinity, last caller. Good morning, caller, on here.
Thank you. So taking my call, Sean. Good morning to you, guys. Now you'll notice a delay in my discussion because I get in a feedback, and I know it's not on your end, right? You hearing me clear?
Yes.
Are you hearing me clearly?
Yes, we are.
Right. Okay, quickly. Tourism not going anywhere in Trinidad because we have had for the past 30 years all the good plans for tourism. And what people do, all the bright people come out of the university, they pass through the Ministry of Tourism, they pass through BWIA, they pass through all the hotels. Once you lay good plans for them, it is shelved because people take the good plans and big business and private enterprise want to benefit from the good plans of tourism. That is why things can't get done in tourism. The current model that Caribbean Airlines is operating under is a failed and flawed model, and I'll tell you why. The company was never able to promote managers from within to top positions. Gavin Madeira came from where? Digicel, top man, wherever he was, he bring a whole slate of people, and those people now have to be taught the airline industry by the middle managers and the operational managers under them. There's a culture within our airline industry that does not allow people to move up to the top positions. That went out since in the early 80s with BWA. You always bring an expert in, bring an expert in, bring an expert in, instead of people growing up in the airline, who grew up in the airline and who are qualified to run the departments and the airline, not doing that, save and except for engineering, right? And that is a poor management model. because they have big salaries. They come from Ireland, they come from Washington, they come from Toronto, and demanding big salaries for a small airline in a developing country. That ain't going nowhere. If the process was different, if the economic model and the accounting model within Caribbean Airlines were different, we would have been able to subsidize the air bridge, because in the off seasons from Europe, in the off seasons from Europe and North America, the people who still maintain Tobago tourism is us, Trinis. I was there last week, last weekend, plenty Trinis, right? We built an airport in Tobago, not an aircraft on the tarmac, a brand new airport. You could walk out to the front of the airport, walk across the neighbor road, and sit down in the neighbor gallery, shake hands, and drink coffee and eat doubles, right? Never before have I seen an airport so close. You can walk from the airport to the shop. Airports don't have residential areas in the proximity. Bad planning, nonsensical as per usual. You understand? So we have all the good plans for everything, but they are shelved because big business, private enterprise want to take the plan and make money for themselves. That is what is happening in Trinidad. For those of us who are not critical thinkers in Trinidad, when I compare us with the Singapore model, I'm not comparing Eric Williams' personality with Lee Kuan Yew's personality. No, it's about the governance model, how Lee Kuan Yew managed roads, infrastructure, national security, public utilities, and health. I ain't a personality, what Lee Kuan Yew do and he do like who, and this ethnicity among the Chinese thing that he do like. That is playing smart with stupidness, right? Well, they're jealous that Lee Kuan Yew did a better job than Eric Williams. Live with that. He did a better job than Eric Williams, and Singapore is much bigger than St. Lucia, and their GDP is 3 times ours without oil. Do the math. Figure it out. The Brent Thomas issue, with the policemen traveling to Barbados to pick up a man, people who sign off on that did not sign off on ink. It was not black ink or blue ink. It was Balize juice. End of story. Your last caller alluded to a secret order. I don't like to mention those things in public, but it's real. And that is how people function, and that is how decisions are being made, and that is how this country has been functioning since 1956. Have a good weekend, gentlemen. Stay good, stay safe.
Thank you, Paul. I don't think it has to be a secret order, but I will say that it could be other influence besides political. That's all I'll say about that, right? Because at the end of the day, those secret orders here really is just businessmen having... I mean, for the most part, right? I don't know what we want to go into the mysticism of it, but they're having connections. And potentially it's not always ethical connections. But with that said, first of all, I'll just say with tourism, domestic tourism has a ceiling, and cruise ship arrivals have limitations for commercialization. So if we're not going to really focus on marketing foreign tourism, the tourism product will always have a cap. It will be a hard cap, or maybe not a hard cap, but we will cap ourselves on how much tourism could grow. Because at the end of the day, 365 days a year, we cannot have Trimegonians coming out for weeks at a time. They come for weekends, which means the hotels are empty during the week. And that's why that cap, it's not as sustainable as you think. We've probably gone as far as you could go with that. You could get more weekend things, but still, you will have the problems with CAL, right? And their unbalanced traffic. Now, Ashraf, just to close, Mr. Sanfano mentioned UAVs versus drones, which I think on a technical level is semantics, but he was referring to the different models. I actually, to some extent, disagree with him. I think it might be better to start off with a more extensive drone program as what was rolled out in New York earlier in the middle of last year or late last year. What I was describing before, where you have pre-positioned drones, not necessarily cheap drones without a battery life, but they have anywhere from 40 minutes an hour. They're pre-positioned throughout various divisions and police stations. And the operations center will have enough pilots to aerially respond, because in some ways you're responding to. You only launch them when there's an incident to go check. They're not just hovering. And that might be cheaper than trying to get UAVs, right? And also the fact that UAVs hovering, surveilling a situation for 3 hours, you run into the problems. A helicopter doesn't record. You run into the problem where you have privacy issues. Seattle had to scrap their drone program because of that, apparently. I don't know to what extent that would happen here, because you're not just having a camera or a high-resolution camera. You're recording everything that you shoot. And that might be an issue for individual freedoms and privacy laws.
I'm all for the the use of drones and technology. It has its values, it has its benefits, it has its pros and cons in the case maybe when you're looking at it. But I want to be very realistic as to what is being done. Do we build our house and decide how you're furnishing it before you study how the foundation is? I mean, we want to put a system and we want to put systems in place. Yeah. So we're talking about buying all the furniture, right? And the furniture is going to the furniture. When you buy the furniture, you don't have a support mechanism to deal with it.
Okay, fair enough.
Right. So, fair enough. So if we want,
so it would include a lot more cost than just the drones.
Exactly. So we're talking about developing the human resource capabilities and training to utilize this. How effective or how useful or what is the type of return on or investment in the drones in a long term or in a short term, because we have to determine whether or not it gives the value for what we intended. Because let's put it this way, we have so much vehicles on the roads of Trinidad and Tobago. We have so many police stations, and I'm still saying, does the police stations give value to what? Now I'm talking to the officers, I'm talking about the police station. Does it serve the purpose of what it was intended for? So yes, I am all for it.
So I mean, just to point it out, one of the limitation factors might be the IT infrastructure network, because I'm speaking about centrally located things. You need that investment as well, right?
So you need a lot of support mechanism.
But I will say this, I think it might be a more cost-effective solution than a blanket CCTV coverage of everywhere, because that's a lot of cameras, right?
Even though we have a lot of cameras, and I think we will have discussion on another occasion, but sometime we could discuss that. We could discuss that on another next week if we want, with respect to utilize that, because that brings another dimension into managing major events, critical incidents. When you have technology, how you utilize technology. CCTV is another part of it also.
But I do think for where we are right now, and maybe this is just the stubbornness of me, I think drones offer a relatively cost-effective solution.
And it's much more versatile than fixed location.
Right. But what we're not saying, this is the be-all and end-all.
So with everything in dealing with technology and in law enforcement and dealing with crime as it is as in the 21st century, utilizing technology, how the criminal elements utilize technology, we have to get up to par and utilizing technology to counter the type of technology that is existing. Because with everything with drones, I mean, there are certain things, shortfall with drones, that if a drone is in the air, there are certain devices that can be utilized that could take that drone out immediately. So there are counterbalances that you have to look at.
One would hope that we could, I don't know, make those things illegal.
On the internet, you can find a lot of things.
I mean, guns get in, so anyway, we have no more time, we're out of time. So with that said, folks, thanks to all the callers and for all of the contributions to both the three topics, I guess you could say. So this was a pretty good segment to close out the week. Thanks for Ashraf for joining me. And yes, I think there's more to talk about technology, CCTV, AI, all of that came up within the last couple of weeks, so we can continue the conversation next week. Closing out the week, folks, have a great weekend. Do your best to be the best for everybody that you meet, because it's always nice to be nice. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Stay safe. We could see each other next week. Bye-bye.
WESN.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private health care affordable.
For all your medical needs,
needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services. Contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Disciplinary cultural institution. We have lots of things to offer to the public. First, we have a museum with a permanent exhibition with the artifacts from all over the Arab world. Then we have